So we have a presentation today on aging in Kansas. We're going to begin with Dan Goodman, who's the Executive Director of KABC. Dan, welcome to committee.
Good morning. How's that? Good. Good morning, Senator Gossage and committee members. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. My name is Dan Goodman. I'm the Executive Director of Kansas Advocates for Better Care. And I'll go to the second slide there. Okay, great. KABC is a nonprofit based in Lawrence with a mission of improving care for older Kansans regardless of where they live. Since 1975, we have advocated, educated, and empowered older Kansans and their families regarding long-term care. We receive no funding from the government or national associations. Our funding comes from the Kansans that we serve. We attempt to advocate from a person-centered approach, focusing on those chosen outcomes, their chosen outcomes, and return on investment. So what does person-centered approach, what does that mean? Services that are delivered in a setting in a manner that is responsive to the individual, their goals, values, and preferences. And what does that mean to a healthcare provider? Providers work collaborative with those in need of care by providing the access and supports, health information necessary to better understand their needs and how they can best achieve those goals. 80% of all older adults desire to remain in their homes as they age in place with the supports and services. And you know, I've worked in this field about 30 years, and I'm not sure I've ever met the other 20%, but at least the studies say that at least 80% of them want to live in their home. And yet Kansas ranks 47th in low care nursing facility residents that need physical assistance. These residents do not need assistance with transfer, mobility, toileting, and eating, and yet they're in facilities to get their long-term care. While at the same time, Kansas also ranks 46th in the nation in addressing staffing shortages in adult care homes. So our current system of long-term care and its approach appears to be prematurely driving low-care residents into institutional settings to receive poor care. There has been progress, though, over the last 10 years, and we'll talk a little bit about that. The Aging Disability Resource Centers have been centralized, and the intake process is a gateway for long-term care for Kansans. This service includes options counseling, functional assessment for this program eligibility. I think it's been very successful since it's been implemented. And then in 2020, the legislature funded a program called Administrative Case Management. That's a service that helps persons navigate the financial application process for Medicaid. And it's a short-term administrative service that assists with only the financial aspects of eligibility, but it has eased the backup and the delay that previously existed before that service. And then currently, these are the options of community-based service for long-term care. Senior Care Act, and this is, in my opinion, Senior Care Act is the best bang for the buck for Kansans. It is a service that's totally paid for by the Kansas taxpayer. The program is state funded. It utilizes a sliding fee scale to determine the individual's cost per care, and so they do contribute to their costs. And because of that, they also get to make some choices about what types of services that they want to have in their home. Plans of care for this program are small yet effective, and they help slow physical decline and remain in their homes. The Older Americans Act is a federal entitlement program which offers a wide array of service for services such as home-delivered meals, congregate meal programming, legal assistance, caregiver support. And then finally, the Home and Community-Based Service Waiver Program for the frail elderly. This program offers personal care, household tasks, health services, and it's offered to folks that are 65 and better with both the financial and functional criteria. And then these are the long-term care options for the institutions. I know the industry's already been here and presented to the committee, so I won't go into detail here, but there are options for folks seeking long-term care in Kansas. And then, how can we improve our current system? Taxpayers and those in need of services deserve improvement in this area. Defined outcomes that measure quality of care would be important. As you notice, I've bulleted a couple items there. 36% of Kansas facilities report staffing shortages in 2022, and Kansas consistently rates in the lower third in the nation in the overuse, I should say, of antipsychotic drugs in the facilities. And the other piece of that is older Kansans are having trouble managing, coordinating, and negotiating their care needs. Those supports that help them stay in the home, and if we could build a support for them in that area, we could keep them at home where they want to be, at least 80% of them. Person-centered policies must also be at the heart of these provider services. Providers need to be more accountable to state funders. For Kansas to improve in better care, we need to tie closely with the funding to outcomes to stop contracts from being renewed when they're not meeting routine outcomes and that type of thing. And then specifically, what are we needing to improve our system? We need a more robust network for community-based services and providers. A more balanced, diversified approach to long-term care will strengthen community-based provider networks, particularly in rural and frontier parts of the state. And then we need to reestablish community-based case management for frail elder waiver that will support older Kansans who have significant trouble managing, coordinating, and negotiating their care needs. And then, I'm a little off on the slides. And then in the area of institutional care, poor staffing levels of adult care facilities is directly linked to poor care for residents. Kansas ranks 46th in the nation in direct care staffing. And legislation that would require written informed consent before administering the antipsychotic medication to residents is needed. Kansas is woefully behind most of the nation in curbing the overuse of the family of drugs in these facilities. And then with that, I will turn the mic over to the next speaker, Leslie Anderson with Kansas K4AD. Thank you.
Thank you. In committee, we will hold our questions until all of the conferees have concluded their testimony.
For my presentation here.
For those on WebEx, we are just waiting for her presentation to be loaded, and I think we're ready now, Leslie.
Nope, that's Jamie's.
Okay, wrong one.
Unless.
We could start with Jamie if that's okay with Dusty. I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm flexible. Awesome. Thank you.
There we are. And Leslie, welcome to committee.
Thank you. Madam Chair, members of the committee, I'm Leslie Anderson. I'm the director of Kansas Association of Area Agencies on Aging and Disabilities, which is why we go by K4AD. I am here representing the 11 area agencies on aging that serve all 105 counties in the state. Thank you for this opportunity to talk about aging in Kansas. Dan Goodman briefly mentioned the services provided by an area agency on aging. In my presentation, we'll fill in the details. Okay. Yeah, that was weird. Dan Goodman briefly mentioned services provided by an area agency on aging, and up until 1965, older adults had 3 choices if they needed help: rely on nearby family, go into a nursing facility, or go without and increase potential harm. The Older Americans Act is a landmark piece of legislation and the first substantial change for older adults to age in place. More than 21% of the population in just 7 years will be at least age 65. Upon reauthorization in 1973, the Act added the area agencies on aging at the community level. Each AAA is different based on identified local community need and available resources. AAAs may be either a nonprofit or under county government, such as Wyandotte Leavenworth, Central Plains Area Agency on Aging in Wichita, and Johnson County. OAA dollars are distributed to states using the census as part of the funding formula, and each AAA has other funding sources, including local dollars, grants, and individual contributions used to match funding. Each AAA is separately governed by a board of directors and an advisory council. KDADS oversees the State Plan on Aging, approved by the Administration for Community Living. Kansas statute also requires a statewide council on aging, but that has not been active for many years. The requirements under the OAA ensures adults age 60 and older and their caregivers have access to non-Medicaid services within the community. This requires the AAAs to be the leaders on aging issues at the local level and adapt to the unique demands of their communities while advocating on behalf of clients and caregivers. Each AAA provides core services mandated by the Act, but each AAA is different and can provide supplemental services based on other funding sources. There is no economic test. However, there is a functional eligibility assessment. The concept aging in place includes all formal and informal services, including non-Medicaid services in the definition of home and community-based services. The comprehensive listing of services on this slide shows that states spend the funds on evidence-based programs to improve health and well-being and reduce disease, disability, and/or injury of an older adult. Case management is extremely helpful in the coordination of services to meet the specialized needs of older adults. The National Family Caregiver Program is specific to serving caregivers at least age 18 who is caring for an older adult. Services include information, assistance, counseling, support groups, caregiver training, respite, and supplemental services on a limited basis. When the OAA was reauthorized in 1972, nutrition services were added. Nutrition is the most commonly needed service throughout the nation. Most people think about Meals on Wheels, but nutrition is much bigger. Benefits include a check-in for older Kansans who are homebound, or socialization and educational opportunities for older Kansans eating at the nutrition sites. There is also the ability to identify additional unmet needs. In fiscal year 21, 3,084,893 meals were provided to 27,867 customers. And in fiscal year 22, 3,130,000 meals were provided to 29,583 customers. 83 customers, sorry about that. Inflation has deteriorated the buying power by 38.35% since 2009 for food. which was the last year of funding increase for the nutrition program that serves older adults. This is resulting in providers struggling to sustain the program. So we've asked for an additional $3 million to help sustain the program and continue feeding older Kansans. As AAA's evolved to be the single point of entry for aging services, it makes sense that a one-stop shop concept or no wrong door entry was established. Dan Goodman went through several of these programs that the AAA's provide, so I won't go through all of those, but I will answer questions at the end in case you have some. All of the additional services illustrate the importance of an older adult making an informed choice with the unbiased options provided by a AAA. All of these services enhance choice and aging in place, regardless of income. It is organic for the AAAs to contract with the State Unit on Aging to provide assessment for home and community-based services and ensure services are not duplicated. I mentioned earlier that AAA services are non-Medicaid. This can be recognized as a cost avoidance to Medicaid. As Kansas is number 47 on the scale of low-care individuals in nursing facilities, the no wrong door concept acts as the entryway into accessing services regardless of payment source. Under the Going Home Transition Program funded by the Administration for Community Living, COVID dollars, 55 nursing home residents transitioned back into the community, with purchases made by grant funds to set up a household and paying deposits and a first month's rent and purchasing food. Although more than 101 residents requested information on the program and options to return home, the individuals who transitioned had a monthly income and an informal support system. Successful transition required the assistance of a coordinator to work with the resident, nursing home, family physicians, family members and friends, and the managed care coordinator. Case management was vital to the continued success of the resident who transitioned. We had 2 individuals who ended up returning to the nursing home. One was because they lost their in-home care aide and the provider was unable to replace that aide. The other one, her health deteriorated after about 7 months in the community. There were participants who had regular discussion with the coordinator, and there was one participant that after he received everything he needed and transitioned, he said thank you and changed his phone number. He is doing awesome today because I was able to find his other phone number and talk to him. So he was excited to start his life back into the community. While performing the pre-transition assessments, a majority of the residents were unaware of the option to return home or who to contact and ask questions about returning home. More than half of the individuals that transitioned were over the age of 60. The Senior Care Act program was enacted in 1989 by the Kansas Legislature in recognition that many older adults may face difficulties maintaining independence in their homes and wanted to avoid premature nursing home stays. The AAA's contract with local providers in the community to provide SCA services. Senior Care Act is used to divert from costlier services, including the frail elderly waiver. In FY22, KDADS reported there was a $7.15 million cost avoidance to the state. A total of 3,666 customers received one SCA service that year, while 1,951 received services on a regular or monthly basis. The benefit of cost avoidance is data-driven, while the second benefit is anecdotal, where a minimum amount of service through the program resulted in a delay or diversion of an institution. Case management has been instrumental to delivering a Smart Dollar program and maintaining good stewardship over the program. Studies indicate that the biggest fear of many older adults is that they will be forced to leave their homes and be placed into a long-term care facility, losing everything they've worked for. Their home is gone, all of their items are gone, which was why the transition program that I spoke about earlier was so important in establishing that tie back into the community. By providing the support that is needed to maintain an independent lifestyle, an older adult is able to age in place and enjoy a better quality of life. Thank you for your time, and I appreciate being able to talk to you about aging in Kansas and how the AAAs that serve all of your constituents in your areas are able to help. I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you very much. And finally, we have Jamie Gideon, Director of Public Policy for the Alzheimer's Association. Thank you and welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee. My name is Jamie Gideon. I'm the Kansas Director of Public Policy with the Alzheimer's Association. I'm here to walk you through some basic information about Alzheimer's, some specific Kansas data, and a few of our legislative priorities for the session. Next slide. So let's jump right in. The Alzheimer's Association is a worldwide organization that has its voluntary health organization dedicated to Alzheimer's care, support, and research. We have 2 chapters in Kansas, one in Prairie Village and one in Wichita, which cover all 105 counties. Next slide. So Gil, can I click through until you, there you go. So the most common question I receive from elected officials is, what's the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? So the best way is to say, first of all, dementia is a collection of symptoms related to cognitive decline. And Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. And there's more than actually 150 different types of dementia. And Alzheimer's is the most common type. At least 75% of those with dementia have Alzheimer's. And some people actually have more than one kind of dementia at the same time. The next frequently asked question is, what's the best way to prevent it? What are my risks? And so the diagram that you see on the slide talks about some of the risk factors, but some of which cannot be controlled, like age. Age is the most and the greatest risk for getting Alzheimer's. Anyone over the age of 65 has the highest risk. Race can also be a factor. Older Black Americans are about twice as likely to have Alzheimer's or other dementias as older whites. Older Hispanics are about 1 and 1.5 times as likely to have Alzheimer's or other dementias as older whites. Also, women are at a higher risk as well. In fact, almost 2/3 of Americans with Alzheimer's are women. The other things that can be controlled, some other factors. One is diet. Diet's a key factor. We say what's good for your heart is also good for your brain. And also one thing that's, I know it's a tough ask for some of you here and most of us actually, but sleep is very important. The most sleep you can get is the better. I mean, we're not talking 12 hours necessarily, but at least 6 minimum is required for your brain to rest and recover each day. And that also will lower your chances. And then the other risk factor is those with fewer years of formal education actually have a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's. And the reason for that, we believe, is brain engagement, things like engagement longer in life. So, for example, as you age, we encourage people to do things like puzzles, any type of, anything that kind of keep your brain engaged for as long as possible. Some people decide to have social activities as long as possible, keep the social engagement as well. Just anything that really seems to reduce your overall risk. The other thing that's a higher risk is traumatic brain injury. So we've seen people that are veterans that have been in combat, and also those that have engaged in contact sports. Unfortunately, like with concussions, that have had a high incidence of Alzheimer's. So those are some things, some of which can be prevented. Fortunately, some of the sports have done a lot more in recent years to try to prevent some of those brain injuries, so that's been helpful. And again, some of these are not 100%. This is not going to say you're going to completely prevent getting the disease, but it can reduce your chances of getting it. Next slide. It goes. Sorry, I'm going to have to click through a little bit. There you Next is important to know some of the prevalence of Alzheimer's in Kansas. So 55,000 Kansans have Alzheimer's approximately. That number is going to increase to at least 62,000 by 2025. And 86,000 caregivers are in Kansas as well, caring for them. And some of that number, it's really just going to dramatically increase even by a lot more by after 2025 because of baby boomers. As baby boomers start to retire and age, that number is going to increase by as much as 40% after 2025. And some of the other numbers that I've found pretty interesting in Kansas, right now, the people that are over age 100 in Kansas, we have 1,200 people in Kansas that are over age 100. And this is some stats coming out of Wichita State. But by 2045, there's going to be 24,000 people over the age of 100 in Kansas. So we as a state are aging, which that we are living longer, but again, that puts you at more risk for getting Alzheimer's. The workforce shortages, which were mentioned previously on the presentations, have also hit our population very hard. We only have 20 geriatricians in Kansas. We need to increase this number by 505% by 2050 in order just to meet demand. We also have 24,860 home health care and personal care aides. In order to meet demand by 2028, we need to increase it by 31.8%. And then also, Alzheimer's is a very expensive disease. The disease costs $473 million in Medicaid dollars per year. And this amount will increase by more than 14% by 2025. Next slide. I'm going to click through a little bit. Okay, so for some good news. For the longest time, Alzheimer's was the only one of the top 10 causes of death with no treatment or no cure until 2021. Now we have at least 2 treatments that have been approved by the FDA and a third being reviewed as we speak. The 2 treatments that have been approved right now are for those in the early stages of the disease. We have several more currently in the pipeline for approval, some of which will treat those in the early stage and mid stage of the disease. So there's a lot of hope for those with the disease and their families. In fact, several Kansans are currently receiving these medications now through clinical trials, one of which is a gentleman from Wichita who owns his own heating and air conditioning company. I met him when he first started, right before he started receiving the medication, and he had to retire and turn the business over to his kids. And then when he started taking the medication through the clinical trial, it literally reversed the course of the disease. When he was diagnosed, he had plaques in his brain. That's how they diagnose people now with Alzheimer's. It used to be many, many years ago that you had to pass away before you were diagnosed. Now, they were able to do PET scans and see how many plaques you have in your brain. So when he was diagnosed, he had lots of plaque buildup in his brain. And when they redid a scan after he had taken the medication for a period of time, they found no plaque at all in his brain. And again, his symptoms had dramatically reduced, so much so he was able to return to work and continue running his company, which he does today. So again, it's not the case for every single person taking this drug. It is not a cure, but it is a viable treatment for many. So again, it's a lot of hope for what's to come. Next. So why do we advocate in Kansas? Our goal is to see Alzheimer's and dementia be a priority by emphasizing that this is a public health crisis. We will push for policies that provide those affected by the disease with the resources they need. Next slide. To mention a little bit about the Alzheimer's state plan. In 2018, former Governor Collier began the process of creating the Alzheimer's state plan by signing the executive order creating a working group whose main task was to draft the plan. Then in 2019, Governor Kelly wanted the work of the previous working group to continue, so she signed an executive order creating a task force. The task force's main job was to create the Alzheimer's disease state plan. People serving on both the working group and the task force came from all over the state from various connections to the disease. The task force met for 6 months, just like the working group, and drafted a plan that was presented to the governor of January in 2020. The 2019 state plan is considered Part 1, and the 2020 plan is considered Part 2. The plan is still being used as a strategic plan for addressing Alzheimer's in Kansas. So for this session, we have two specific bills we are supporting. The first is Charlie's bill, which is SB 191, which would create the right to an appeal and involuntary discharge or transfer from an adult residential care facility. Those with dementia are particularly susceptible for transfer trauma. It is currently in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And then the second bill would create a dementia services coordinator position within the Kansas Department of Aging and Disability Services. This will make a big difference in how Alzheimer's is addressed in Kansas. There's currently no position in the state of Kansas that addresses Alzheimer's or dementia specifically, so we're trying to change that. At least 29 states have this, and it's made a tremendous difference in actually saving money. Some of those Medicaid dollars I talked about, it's actually worked to reduce the cost of the disease in that state. And some of the ways that reduce the cost, first of all, it oversees the state plan that I mentioned, and the task forces, if any, were to be established. It also establishes and maintains relationships with all state agencies and community organizations in order to meet community needs and prevent duplication of services in case there are any. And then evaluate existing Alzheimer's and dementia programs and services and identify any gaps within state government. And then generally increase awareness of and facilitate access to quality, continued care for people with dementia. Okay, next slide. And I've included my contact information for you. Thank you.
Jamie, thank you so much. Thank you to all of our conferees committee. Do we have questions for our conferees? And Jamie, if you want to stay up there, if there are any particular for Jamie, since she's already here. Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. According to your chart, I should have Alzheimer's by now. No, this is a very serious problem, and I guess my quick question is, if somebody does stay engaged, keeps their brain, do you see a rapid decline if somebody suddenly just says, I'm sitting down, I'm not, say they were doing well, they were busy with a business and stuff like that, and all of a sudden they just kind of disengage? Do you see a much more rapid decline?
Yes, actually, we have seen that. People that have been very active, whether it's just going to different volunteer activities, engaged, like I said, puzzles, crosswords, anything like that, and all of a sudden they stop for whatever reason it might be, whether they might have an illness or a fall or something where they aren't able to do those activities for a period of time. We have seen where all of a sudden that person will develop symptoms of dementia.
Okay. I have a question for other conferees, but I'll let somebody ask the Alzheimer's questions first.
Thank you. We can stay with Jamie while she's up there, and Senator Petty.
Thank you, and thanks, Jamie, for being here. Though, as you said, age is the one denominator that can affect all of us. We can't stop it. It can impact some of the other things like education or our diet, but we're all going to get older for sure. You mentioned about the dementia service coordinator, and could you expound on what's the cost?
Sure. The cost estimate, so that would be, the fiscal note would be approximately $100,000, including benefits, be the fiscal note. That's the estimate.
And based in the Department of...
Of KDADS. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I have a question. You mentioned being able to appeal a transfer that one did not want to do. Is that in a bill form that I recall seeing?
Yes.
Okay, Jen is telling me yes. Okay, thank you. Committee, other questions for Jamie? Jamie, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now we'll go in reverse order. Leslie, any questions for Leslie, committee? Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Leslie, hi. With older adults, I was talking to the EMS people, and the vast majority of their calls are for elderly folks who are still fine, but they have a lot of falls. And I've had relatives who've had this. They're still fine mentally, physically, with the exception that they will fall, and what kind of services are available? Are there, I know they have like the visiting angels and people who might come in during the day, but a lot of these falls happen at night. When they wake up, they're disoriented, they may need to use the restroom. What kind of answers are available for adults with that kind of a situation so they can stay in their home and don't have to go to assisted living or something like that? Because a lot of them want to stay in their home. They're just having issues with falls and things like that.
Sure, that's a good question. So under the Senior Care Act, there is the potential to receive a one-time service or regular services. That includes an assessment of need. So let's say a person who falls does not have an assistive device or durable medical equipment to help them get out of bed, like a walker or bed rails or something. The Senior Care Act can provide that. So can the Older Americans Act, as well as other community-based organizations that are out there. In addition to, there is the assistive technology for Kansans. They can help with some durable medical equipment as well. So a person doesn't necessarily have to be on managed care under the FE waiver to get the durable medical equipment or assistive technology to help them remain in their home.
Are there, I'm sure, financial guidelines to who is eligible or not necessarily?
It depends on the program.
Okay.
Yes. Senior Care Act, one of the beauties of the program is that it is not the same threshold as your FE waiver, okay? So you can have a higher income and not be on Medicaid in order to get those services. That was one of the major considerations of the bill, that a person would not have to spend down all of their resources in order to get a little bit of help.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, other question? Senator Petty.
I say thank you for being here, but isn't one of the biggest, I mean, I have to say I have friends, and one of the biggest obstacles is finding help within the home.
I think it depends on what your needs are. Again, that functional eligibility piece to determine what those needs are is very instrumental in making those decisions, as well as an informed choice that that person has. So let's say that person only needs 2 hours a week. Okay, the Senior Care Act provides that minimal number of hours, and you have someone who is available for 2 hours a week or 4 hours a week because they work around different schedules, their children, et cetera. It's more flexible than if you're working for a person that is receiving FE waiver and they need 6 hours a day or 4 hours a day every day. So that flexibility model allows for more workforce to be in that home. Now, I will tell you, there are worker shortages everywhere, right? But when you're working around a lot of flexibility, it has a way of providing options for that person. And there is the self-directed model on the Senior Care Act program as well.
And can the family member become that caregiver, be reimbursed?
Yes, under the Senior Care Act model, yes. Under OAA, I'm not sure. I'm going to call a friend. Dan used to be an executive director of the Area Agency on Aging in Johnson County. He says yes, so I'm going to go with yes.
Okay, thank you.
Senator O'Shea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here. I know with the Senior Care Task Force, I feel like you all played a vital role in lots of that conversation. And looking at that plan again, I know that there's a lot of conversation around upgrading technologies at our AAAs. Can you speak to that? And then also, something that was kind of continually brought up was this idea of a state advisory council. And it sounds like we used to have that and we don't now. Can you tell us a little bit about the context around that and why we need it now?
Okay, let me start with that, because that's going to be a real easy one. Statute requires it. It's not happening. That's bottom line. Now, let me give you a little bit more on that. So when you when you look at the Older Americans Act, and it provides for governance of the AAAs, and one of those pieces of governance is that advisory council, that seems to be the driver as to why there is not a statewide advisory council. It's not the same thing. If you look at statute, there is a lot more responsibility, including the recommendation for the Secretary of Department for Aging and Disability Services. So it is at a much higher level than your local advisory councils at each AAA. So I think that the state plan shows that they will be working on seating that council. And I think maybe having that discussion with KDADS is very important at that time, because they were looking at doing that in FY23. Here we are. Then the other one, the technology, I think that depends on each area agency on aging, because you have county government, which has a lot of technology and advanced technologies and abilities to do things with their management information systems, whereas the smaller ones use hybrid models, right? Maybe through the Access, Microsoft, smaller programs. And I think, a lot has to do with how much money you have to put into a management information system outside of what the state uses. So we have, different models that they use, your internal, and then you have the state system, which is ks. So you might have heard about that when the Officer of Inspector General was talking about that, and how ks and the Medicaid eligibility for the financial do not interface. And so there's some of that technology that needs to be worked through in order to have a really robust, reliable system. Yeah.
Committee, other questions? I have just one. If someone is in like independent living, and they have somebody come in 2 or 3 times a day just to help them make sure they're taking their medication appropriately, other minor things, but otherwise they're independent. Is this something that, because I know somebody who's paying for this directly, is this some kind of home health care? This person will be 93 in March.
It depends.
Okay.
Again, it goes back to that functional eligibility piece, the financial eligibility piece, their needs. But if it's under the Senior Care Act, they can, if they're an assisted living facility, they can receive some Senior Care Act services. Again, it goes on that need and choice. There's all these other considerations other than just age.
Good. I'd like to talk to you more about that after. And committee, with just a couple minutes we have left, let's invite Dan Goodman. Thank you so much, Leslie, for being here. Dan, would you come up to the microphone? Are there any questions for Dan? Senator Petty.
Hi, Dan. Good to see you. You mentioned that we rank 46 in the country. And is that, just expand a little bit on that.
That's in regard to the long-term care the direct care staffing and facilities.
Okay.
And so.
Thank you. So directly to staff, we're 46 on availability of staff with.
Just the ability to be, staffed appropriately in those facilities.
Thank you.
Committee, additional questions? Committee, this is all we have on our agenda today, so we are adjourned.